As an icebreaking question, I'd like to share a couple of questions with you and then some following detailed questions leading from that, and then listen to your views and opinions. Well, these are all very high profile companies from the UK. TELUS is one of the most well known global companies, and also the same for Origo. Uh, I've understand that it's one of the most well known autonomous driving solution companies in UK. And also, Naver Labs, maybe the UK speakers might not be familiar, but is one of the most leading R&D companies of one of the top portal sites of Korea. And Hyundai is another familiar name to you. Emotional is another hot company that is on its rise. So today we have a very somewhat sensitive topic. Nevertheless, you have shared so much with us, so I'd like to express my gratitude. As I listen to the presentations, well, today's topic is CAM, Connected and Automated Mobility. I could understand that you provided your insight from various perspectives at each company. And particularly, our two speakers from the UK may not be that familiar with the Korean situation or Korean presentations. But as you listen to the presentation, I wonder whether you came to thought about any possible cooperations or collaborations. And I also want to ask for your impression of your as you listen to the Korean presentation. So first, I'd like to ask Mr. Garner of your impression as you listen to the Korean presentation and any possible proposals for future collaboration.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you very much. That was a really was a nice intro. So I attended the CAV conference a year ago. It was almost exactly a year ago, where I and about 10 other colleagues came over, and we attended that conference, and I was talking there. And really, over that past year, I have had some really good communications with a couple of companies. We haven't yet offered a product into Korea. I'm really hopeful that we can ever so soon. So our countries are aligned in a lot of ways, really over CAV. And really, I was just taking a listen to the Kia, the OEM presentation there, and it was really interesting to hear that actually from a really a big OEM.
예, 고맙습니다.
Thank you. Also, let me ask Mr. Shin and Mr. Peck. We don't have a lot of Korean companies that have HD maps, high definition maps, and Naver Labs has that. And also, from Motional's perspective, in order to do robot taxis, you will need to leverage technologies of Naver Labs, right? Yes, I do want their technologies, definitely. To commercialize robot taxis? Yes, you do need that technology for a good map. You need that built up data. But what's also important is to be able to quickly update the data. And also you need a platform to bring about engagement of the people. In that respect, the technologies and solutions of Naver Labs that I saw during the presentation were very attractive. Immediately, for us, we don't really have any specific plans for actual launches in Korea. But after that, when we do have actual launches on the markets, then of course, yes, I would love to collaborate with Naver Labs.
Mr. Peck from Naver Lab, as you listen to Motional's presentation, we understand that the first target region is the US. So what about Naver Labs? Are you interested in going overseas? Well, thank you for the intro as well. And our technology is not just limited to creating a map for Korea. It's about enhancing efficiency and the economic cost of developing a map, and also providing location perception based on that mapping technology. So it's not necessarily limited to domestic market. We could also think about collaboration. So maybe we could discuss this sort of later on for a greater scale up. And from Kia Motors, we have Mr. Jiup Kang and Mr. Peter Davis from Thales. Mr. Davis, well, Thales actually works with so many companies. As a matter of fact, as I listened to your presentation, what was most impressive was economical cybersecurity.
You talked about the complex system, and you talked about the increase in failures and recalls in complex systems, increasing the need for cyber resilience, which is also economical. I'm sure that's something of interest for OEMs. So, Mr. Davis, could you share your advice for the OEMs from Thales' point of view? And also, I want to know what you thought about the Kia presentation.
Thank you very much. And I was very interested in all of the other presentations. So Kia one was very interesting in looking at the ways and the economics associated with moving to a mobility solution. And I think one of the things that Thales has been concentrating on and that we think we could help with, and certainly it's one of the areas that we discussed with Arrigo back in the UK, is this element of how we can give resilient systems so that you can realize the benefits. So one of the things that we've been concerned about is developing methods that would allow people to realize the benefits from the investments that they're making. Because our fear was with cyber attacks, what you would do is get into a situation where people would do really excellent work. They'd work out economic models. And then, as we tried to move to mass deployments of those sorts of things, we'd be in a situation where somebody would stop that working and it would destroy the economics. So I was very interested in the presentation from our Korean colleagues in relation to that. The way that they were thinking about how they would make money in relation to that. And I certainly think that some of the methodologies and how we might actually make legally sustainable claims around those and do economically viable cybersecurity would be one of the things that we might well collaborate together with. Certainly in the UK, that's an area we've worked on a lot with our insurance colleagues, with our colleagues in the legal profession, to try and make sure that what we have is something that is well-founded for mass deployments, as well-founded for small, localized deployments or areas where you can control the harm. And our feeling was this is really the first time that we've been having to do those sorts of things. So Thales is extremely interested in being able to help colleagues, people in neighboring industries with how we might actually progress in being able to make a sustainable business going forward. And not create something that we all have to back away from just at the point where it becomes interesting. So I was very interested in my Korean colleagues' presentation from that point of view and how they might actually fit into that overall picture.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. And next, Mr. Kang, what did you think about the other presentations? Yes, we are thinking of mobility services based on autonomous driving, but there are different opinions on the timing. We talked about security, HD maps for autonomous driving, and a range of different topics for autonomous driving. And I could feel that we are nearing the date when we see commercialization of these services. And I see that the development is taking place faster than I thought. As I said, Kia Motors is trying to promote EVs in our portfolio. But at the moment, mass deployment of EVs has not happened yet. We have met a lot of potential customers in certain regions. We have to have the infrastructure readiness and the communications readiness in the regions. And if the regions have such readiness, then they were willing to discuss the deployment of EVs. Especially, a lot of these cities have this big initiative of smart cities, but also the cities that want to be green cities, they have initiatives to promote the deployment of EVs. And we are seeing a lot of technologies maturing. So I look forward to more collaboration in the future to make greater progress. Now, thank you, Mr. Kang. Why don't I start asking questions to you first about your presentation? Today, you talked about case studies in Europe. Especially, you talked about your short-term rental model in Italy and Russia, where you're doing POC. And in Spain, you launched a service called Robo that you mentioned during the presentation, and you also talk about a lot of electrification models that you have in mind. Why are you targeting the European market specifically? And that could be a competition with existing fleet operators for you. So are you thinking about any next business models? The reason why we targeted Europe is simple. North America and Europe are the biggest markets. North America is already polarized between Uber and Lyft, so we thought that it would be difficult to be successful in the North American market, whereas in Europe it was a little different. The European market was very fragmented. And also, as I told you, each European country, each European city has policies to promote green cars. For example, I mentioned Madrid, Spain. It offers a lot of incentives for green cars. And that's why we became the third operator in Madrid to offer green cars. And also, we have what's called Motion Lab, which is a subsidiary of Hyundai Motors in Korea. And we currently are doing our first project there. So we are adapting ourselves to the different regulations and the different deployment environments in each city, each environment, so that we can minimize our cost in our new business. So we think that mobility services will start to generate profit once the EVs become mass deployed. So what we're doing is we're targeting the cities that are most friendly for these innovative mobility services.
You talked about global expansion. Well, you're based in the UK. So among the GIA strategies, one was about the purpose-based vehicles, and I think that's another potential for cooperation to introduce new services or products in Europe. That thought came to my mind as I listened to your presentation. And I also have a question to Mr. Shin of Motional.
You talked about the technology challenges, business challenges, and you talked about how you're preparing for it and how you are trying to deploy the right systems in order to overcome challenges. So here goes my question. You said that there are three main benefits to robotaxis based on autonomous driving, mainly safety, reliability, and accessibility. I think that the first two were explained sufficiently. But do you think that in 2025 they will really be accessible? What's your strategy to actually provide the accessibility benefits to consumers? Yes. In terms of accessibility, I don't think that 2025 will be the year when we have breakthroughs in accessibility, because based on the robotaxis that we have planned for 2025, it's really based on the existing vehicle platform with human drivers. And therefore, we won't have something radical by 2025 in terms of accessibility. However, we will move beyond 2025. And when you don't have the driver sitting in the front seat in the taxi, you have more efficient utilization of the space. You can, for example, you can even be accompanied by robots that aid your walking if you have any disability, and you can even have you can load the wheelchair in the boot because you have more space. But of course, we will need to work harder on these solutions, on refining these solutions, so that we can actually free up the space where there's currently a human driver sitting. So that's an area that we're working on. And I would like to ask the same question to Arigo.
So listen to the presentation. You talked about Pod Zero or Shuttle Zero and other form factors in the autonomous driving vehicles that you introduced. As you introduced the Shuttle Zero, it's a form factor with a driverless would be the basic, and then there could be options for other functions like the steering wheel or the pedal for conventional driving as well. And you also introduced some actual cases, and was it the Milton Case City? You introduced the pod testing, and also in Australia, you introduced the retirement village, where the mobility underprivileged residents could use the service. So do you have any type of strategies to provide greater accessibility? I could understand that you're making various type of trials of your pods. So what are your future strategies for such mobility accessibility?
Yeah, thank you. We took a decision as a company 2015 to enter the last mile transportation area, and I touched on it in the presentation that on road in a real world environment for autonomous vehicles is a very tough thing to do. All the time you and I are in our cars, it is very hard to make it in a really seamless type of transportation. So we took a decision to come off road, low speed, in a very controlled environment, like for campuses and also like universities and for towns and cities. And really over those years, really as a business, we have turned it really out of a trial into a commercial, so actually proposition, where we're able to offer these type of products now around the world, into residential areas. The one I was talking about on the presentation, that's in Canberra over in Australia, and the really recent launch of the shuttle takes us on road, and we took a decision to offer that as a conventional electric vehicle, or as a shuttle. So you could operate it as a driver, and you have pedals and you have a wheel, and where you're allowed, you can then operate it as an autonomous vehicle. We took that decision also because a lot of our competition tend to offer the autonomy only, and from talking to customers, it was very clear that the actual real-time operational of autonomy is really short, because, and for obvious reasons, we're in a type of trial, type of phase. So actually giving customers an option to take a conventional electric shuttle that you can carry up to 12 people. In a COVID type of world, we are we're up to 6 people to keep it really as a COVID type of secure. And it's really, it is an easier type of sell into a customer. So that was our decision, really as a business. And really after the launch over August at the PGA, here at the Wales Open with the Celtic Manor, we have pushed out that, and we've now actually kicked off a trial at Cambridge here in the UK, where you'll be seeing the shuttles operating around the western area of the city, taking people in a rural transportation way.
발표에서 뭐
Yes, it seems that you're venturing into a lot of different service areas, and I do look forward to future outcomes from you. Let me add another question to that.
면 이게 이제 경제성 측면에서 어떤 상황인지도 굉장히 좀 궁금합니다. 사실 이제 모셔널의 로봇 택시에 대해서
I think when you make these new trials, you have to consider the economic factors as well. Well, compared to the conventional transportation, how does the economic factor work in? When do you think will you reach a certain level of profitability? So, could you please share your outlook on this topic as well?
Is that a question to myself? Sorry.
yes.
It is, right, great. So, yeah, as I mentioned, so all of these are trials. We have real customers who are now actually buying these products. So commercially, we have now taken it to the next entity of a commercial business. So, yeah, the shuttle, as I mentioned, so that really actually takes us on road where we're able to compete in a with a standard or conventional vehicle as well. So just not sure if that answers your question or not.
예, 일단 제가
Well, so basically, I asked a question about the economic factor, and I think that was relevant to the question. And I also want to ask Mr. Shin Sang-yi of Motional, when you talk about the cost structure.
일종의
So you're going for unmanned robo taxis, but also it entails the cost of people managing the robo taxis. So what's your targets in terms of the economics? And how well do you think you will be able to achieve the target? That's a tough question to answer. That's something that's always on our mind. What we can say today is as follows. Internally speaking, for the first 2 years, we are not really expecting any profits. And that's because when you think about autonomous driving system, of course, you need to have the right redundancies. And also in operation, you need to have the right redundancies. Because it's an unmanned taxi, you don't have that driver who can respond to unexpected situations within the vehicle. So you need a lot of infrastructure and operational efforts to make up for this driver's absence. So that's why for the first few years, we will have to bring a high safety margin with us. That's why our profitability will be low. However, in the second year, third year, and going onward, when we build operational experience, when we have data built up, then we will be able to identify the issues that arise on our structured software. And these structured software will be able to reduce and resolve these problems automatically. That will reduce our operational cost. So after 3 years from launch, we will be able to turn black, basically. Thank you. You have a specific plan, and you just said 3 years is your target for starting to make profit. So I do have high expectations for you. Well, in this industry, you have to be ambitious, I think, because you have to change a huge market. Yes, that's exactly why we have brought you here today. Now, let me hear from Mr. Pak from Naver Labs.
Well, up to now, I've listened to your presentation in many previous times, and so I'm familiar with the mapping technology. But on top of that, I have another question. For example, you also introduced the Seoul City map about 2,900 miles. So how will you make that technology efficient or monetize it? And then also introduce a new technology which I was interested in, but you said you should refer to your literature. So, well, I'll need to look it up with my staff. And then you also introduced the AHEAD ALT project. So I want to ask for the details of that because I think there's a similarity with what's being done by Arugo and also by the PBB of Kia has also certain similarities. Up until now, the Toyota e-Palette has been one of the most promoted platforms, but we see domestic companies that are also working on this concept. So I'm very happy to hear that. So could you elaborate on that, please? So when I regarding the Across project, well, for the algorithm, please refer to the literature. As I said, the equipment would be basically low-cost equipments and the camera. It could be a black box or a dash cam, and we want to update it through dash cams. And for iCam, what we ultimately pursue is to use our map with our location and location platform to create an autonomous mapping. Well, Alt has slight differences from the previous auto sector because we think a car is an auto, is a robot. We basically think that it is a manless. And I think there are many benefits to that. First of all, it will be very lightweight. You don't have to make it so strong and durable. And it could be more flexible from regulation and safety standards. For example, if our car is in an accident, if it's broken into pieces, it's still okay because it's manless. So from our perspective, in the logistics area where we move cargo, I think that is the first step that we can apply. And then that is a target that we're developing technology for. But in the long run, even these vehicles will need to be run on roads, so it will require more autonomous vehicle technology. So that's a very interesting perspective, and I believe that will kind of shorten the time to commercialization.
Today, we had in-depth discussions on connected and automated mobility with the experts. Now, it's connected and automated, which means that there are security concerns. Earlier, Mr. Davis touched upon this. When there is a cyber attack, everything falls apart. That's a big risk. I myself am in the industry and I am developing services in this area, and I often get asked about my security policy. So that's a big concern. And I'm sure the other companies are doing a good job in protecting security as well. When we do mobility project in KT, we always think about whether security is an investment or a cost. So we talk about that a lot internally. Is it a cost or is it an investment? So I think can I ask Mr. Davis once again your view on that? So what do you think about that question? And it could also be related to standardization and regulation. This is not something that a single country can resolve in the short term. There could be maybe like a global regulation covering the security for connected and automated vehicles. So what's your view on that?
Thank you. And obviously I could talk forever about this, as most security experts could. However, I think it's very important that we start to think about things differently here. So when I came into this industry, people were talking about safety and security as though they were different. And of course, the techniques that you use are different. However, I guess one of the things that I'd like you to think about and take away is that very often, in order to do safety, I need to do security. So many of my security techniques are to achieve safety, or are to achieve privacy, or are to allow you to make money out of the data that you have on your platform. And those things are the reasons that you use it. And it's those contradictions in those that make life so difficult there. And when I was talking about this being a complex system with having emergent properties, again, one of the things I'd like us to think about, rather than the way we've talked about these things previously, and it's fundamental to being able to move from small deployments to very large scale ones is that you have emergent properties. Now, most of the value of all of our Western economies is based on emergent properties of digital systems. It's things that we didn't necessarily think about. And the observation here is, for instance, the interaction between maps and some of the technologies that may use them, the interaction with some of the positioning satellites, the interaction with some of the road furniture, the traffic lights, the interaction with all of these types of systems mean that you have so many pieces moving that this isn't something that you design and get it right from a security point of view. So you have to be in a position to understand and take advantage in a dynamic sense of emerging security problems. But if you design that properly, that's not just designing it to be able to take advantage of emerging security problems, it's designing it to be able to take advantage of emergent properties that will be fundamental to your business model. So imagine, for instance, that you've designed your robo taxi, you expect it to work in a particular way, and you actually find that actually something is emerging in the way that people are using the service that you could use and that you would be able to adapt to that one. And that is often where the biggest revenue streams come from. So as to your question of whether this is a cost or whether this is something that's normal, as it were, designing your systems to make sure that you can take advantage of these things in what is in any way, in any case, a complex system, means that if you do it right, you should actually be in a situation where you're also looking at the cybersecurity, you're also looking at the security aspect of that. And a large part of that means that we need to resist some of those places where people are telling us that we need to build it stronger, we need to do these sorts of things that we would have done on very small scale systems, but we will never be able to make that work on a large scale system, particularly those with machine learning, artificial intelligence, and these kinds of combinations. So I think if you look at the way of doing, if we choose the right path here, the security that you might put into this will not only not actually be adding to the cost, actually it will be a fundamental part of being able to adapt your systems and take advantage of the emerging business opportunities. And I think the final question you asked in relation to the standards there, I think at this stage, the world is trying to deal with what do standards look like, what do we need to do? And the most important thing is we need to concentrate on what we can actually do in these types of systems, how that will work, because if we build a world based on standards that were good for what we were doing in the 1950s, it will not work with what we need to do in the 21st century. So we need to avoid committing ourselves to 5 or 10% of our cost being committed to security and not actually delivering anything. That was kind of what I was trying to say when I gave you a picture of a gate. Security people will tend to give you beautiful gates, but they will not contribute to the long-term security of your system. And that is what we need to concentrate on. How can our safety systems rely on the security over the long term in the face of emergent properties, which is not the way we would traditionally have designed these systems. And that, I think, is, if you do that properly, then your security will contribute in a major way to your business models. And if you do that badly, it will be a major cost to your business models.
알겠습니다. 좀 말씀.
Yes, thank you very much for your comments. And I believe the 4 companies, excluding Thales, will be adding up to your budget for security as you listen to the presentation. During the past 2 to 3 years, CAM and its technology-related conferences were very frequent. And this session was especially about the service of CAM, and we exchanged some very insightful opinions and knowledge. And many people have now a greater knowledge of the CAM service. And this is not just for today, but also for future collaboration. So I hope that today provides that occasion. Well, I understand that from UK you attended this session at such an early morning. So thank you very much, Mr. Tail, Mr. Davis and Mr. Garner, and also Mr. Shin and Mr. Peck and Mr. Kang from Korea, who have been with us at until such a very late time. Thank you also